manyoko so we ya son namu. Kia kwani bato we money oh ya do mon si awie ya o. Amo manyoko so we ya son mu ya. Kia kwani bato we money oh ya do mon si awie ya o. Kia se pa yanju o kia se pa yanju o kia kia sa pa yanju ka o kia ma se pa yanju ju o so si o lele ya si o lele o ya si o lele lele o ya si o lele yo si o lele amon manyo ko so wi ya son dan be mu Kia kwani bato we money o abinyon me do mon si awie ya o. Kia se pa yan jijo mama. Kia se pa yan jijo re son ke. Wo kia ya kia. Kia se pa yan ju o. Kia ya uri money. Mo re tole se ma bembe son bi. Kia ya uri manjo e abato ni. Passion même oh Kia ya we money Mo retole se ma même pio abinyo be Wo kia.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Tough Talking Thursday that comes to you every Thursday here on Focus on Liberia. This is a platform where we discuss critical issues related to development, politics, in Liberia. So today we will be discussing, I know many of you might have heard about the statement of press release that the U.S. ambassador put out this week. We will be discussing that issue and actually trying to contextualize the statement within the context of the U.S. foreign relations with Liberia. We will also be discussing the issue of Ambassador Joseph Boakai speak. We are very close to it. That will be done tomorrow. Tomorrow, the whole country is going to know who is going to be his running mate in the 2023 general and presidential elections. So on set with me this evening to discuss this are regular panelists that have been here. You've listened to them many times, and we are great to have them because they have a lot of insight in relation to what we are discussing today. So on set today, we have Dr. Abdoulaye Dukule, who has always been here to share his perspectives with us, which is very important, considering his long years of experience working around governance issues in Liberia, working with political leaders, presidents, and all of that. So Dr. Duke, welcome to today's edition.
Thank you, Mr. Kane, and hello to Mohammed and Ahmed. I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you, Doc. We welcoming back FOL governance consultant who has been away observing the month of Ramadan. I can see that he's fresh to be able to discuss this topic tonight. So Ahmed, welcome back to the platform.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Let's do it. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to be in your hands tonight.
Thank you. And then Mohammed Sharif, who is the FOL political analyst. So today he is well prepared to be able to discuss the political implications of the VP selection and all of that. So Mohammed, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be here as always.
Thank you. So I think the statement or the press release from the U.S. ambassador has been discussed because it came out on April 24th. A lot of platforms have discussed it, but I would like us here on Tough Talking Thursday to be able to take a step back and not just directly go to the statement, the paragraphs that are in there, the points that he makes, but to be able to look at diplomacy. I mean, the U.S. is our traditional ally. We've had over 100 years of relationship with the U.S. We have had multiple ambassadors that have been assigned to Liberia, but we've seen that over the past 2 to 3 years, there has been a shift in terms of the work and the approach to this relationship. So we will get to the statement a little later, but I would like for us to really start by looking at broadly our diplomatic relationship with the United States over the past 5 to 6 years. So I would like to start with Dr. Duke And the question I want to start with is that let's look at this relationship. It has grown over the years, but has the relationship between the diplomatic relationship between Liberia and the US, has it improved or it has worsened over the past 5 to 6 years, based on your assessment of everything that has happened to date?
Thank you for the question. And really, I think the answer is very simple. It's worsened. I mean, if you're talking about just the last 6 years, of course, it's worsened. It's the first time that an elected president of Liberia, except Charles Taylor, has now visited the White House as a guest. Has never received any accolade. In the 5-6 years, I don't remember anybody of first class administration person from the U.S. going to Liberia for any substantive things. The vice president went to Africa. She didn't reach Liberia. The first lady went to Africa. The secretary of the treasury, the head of diplomacy went, and many other people went to Africa. Nobody ever mentioned Liberia. The only people who went to Liberia are the guy on corruption and the CIA director. And we came here, and up to today, I mean, our embassies are like non-functional. It's not like the old days where, Liberia was sort of not just the entry point of the US in Africa, but also a voice on the continent. So that had changed. And you can tell the difference, of course, you can tell between Madame Sirleaf and this government. You can't even make the comparison. There's no, in terms of diplomacy, in terms of respect, in terms of, equality, not equality per se, but you sort of talking to each other as adults. The US and Liberia were talking to each other as adults at one point. And that was important because that gives you a sense of sovereignty, it gives you a sense of independence, and it gives you a sense of that, you are a nation of people, not just dependents. But that has that has gone away. So definitely, yes, it has worsened in many, many ways.
Thank you very much, Dak. So I will just pick up on the point there. I think after our civil war as a country, one of the things that we pride ourselves after the civil war was that Liberia was readmitted into the Committee of Nations. We were now recognized as a country that other countries dealt with, and really saw us as a sovereign state and respected us for that. And we went through 12 years of trying to build that image. So I think one of the partners that will respect that will be your traditional partner, because your traditional partners are often the ones that have these close relationships with you. So I'll come to you, Ahmed, building on what Dak said. If you look at this relationship, in addition to the points that he highlighted, where do you think things have gone wrong? How did we get here?
Thank you, Thomas. And once again, happy to be here with these esteemed co-panelists on the same platform. Why are we here? Where did things go wrong? So many places. I mean, it's even difficult to begin to filter out and pinpoint where and how did things go wrong. Of course, look, any president comes with their own personalities. Some have more charisma than others. Some are more charismatic than others, because these are different things, right? Charisma is not how handsome you are or how tall or short you are. Charisma is really to be charismatic is a skill one develops, and so yeah, it varies with the individual given their experience and how well they're able to put what team together, because the team you surround yourself by makes the whole difference as well, because that those with specific expertise, who bring different capital, whether it's political capital, social capital, or some technical skills that lends themselves to the services of the chief executive. And so I say this to mean that all of these can help with how you cultivate what diplomatic relationship you have. Let's forget the history, because we've always gone back to the history to blame the U.S. For neglecting Liberia. Essentially, I mean, United States. If anyone reads diplomatic history books between Liberia and the United States, you know that Liberia has essentially been an exploited country by the United States. We've always been there. We were there during the World War II. We were there during the Cold War. Liberia served as this springboard, this launching pad where United States stationed all kinds of intelligence infrastructure to be able to be effective, whether in the in the MENA region or in Asia and other parts of the world. Liberia has always been there. So that's the history there. In terms of why it is so low, why are we at such a point where a U.S. ambassador has to be an activist to really speak directly to the public, to the international community about the ills of our government? I say that is a failure of statecraft. Statecraft is a thing that a president ought to understand, a cabinet ought to understand how to govern, how to relate to other countries, particularly who you consider your chief partner, right? Your so-called traditional partner. You have to be able to resolve difficult matters behind the scenes. But to do that, you have to be seen to be governing. You have to be seen to be capable. You have to be seen to be competent. Because you may be competent. If you're not exuding competence, you're not delivering, and the country seems to be going the wrong direction, everybody will say that you are incompetent. You may be competent, but if you're not governing the way people expect traditional countries to govern, to function, to implement the social contract between the state and the people, anybody can talk to you anyhow. Just like, you say you're big brother, but you can't behave like a big brother. People will talk to you anyhow they want to talk to you, because it's two-way street, right? That's how I see. I see that the U.S. doesn't respect Liberia because they don't see this administration to be presenting our country as an equal partner, as a country with sovereign authority and to sovereign authority. They don't respect them in terms of the diplomatic skills. They don't see a real defined foreign policy that's anchored on domestic policy. They're not seeing any of those. So when they see these ills, the guy thinks he can come out to just speak to our president, to our government any way he wants.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. So, Mohammed, share your perspective on why do you think this relationship has deteriorated to this level?
Yeah, so my esteemed co-panelists have just laid out some of the very important and even going into a little bit of historical data point there that Ahmed did right there. So you have to understand that, as Ahmed mentioned, this is the relationship of unequals. Liberia, he mentioned, Liberia has been there. So if we go to, for example, during the Second World War or even the First World War, Liberia has always been on the side of the Allies, which is the United States. In recent times, Thomas, there was a president of the Republic of Liberia who threatened to engage into a face fight on behalf of Ronald Reagan, and this was Samuel Doe back in the mid '80s, somewhere in the mid '80s. towards towards the Civil War. So this is how deep Liberia has been sort of, Liberia has, we have, tie ourselves around the United States. So the question is, how has the United States reciprocated this sort of love fest that we Liberians have for the United States? So that's the big question for all of us. In examining that, I would say that, and I continue to say it's relationship of one equals. In contemporary Liberian history, Liberia was a launching pad, a beachhead, if you will, for a bulwark for a communist or Marxist, the spread of Marxism in sub-Saharan Africa. So therefore, you have a certain Liberian president, perhaps, who was used, where Liberia was used to transport arms and ammunition logistics to the rebel forces of UNITA in Angola, where Liberia was used, airport was used to transport equipment to the rebel Renamo forces in Mozambique, reactionary forces that were fighting against the causes of the African people. So Liberia has stood in some very dangerous positions where they're backing reactionary elements at the whims and of the United States of the United States government. So the United States has not sufficiently reciprocated. But let's take that apart. So if we lay that aside, I'm not ready tonight to give George Weah a break, because all of the things that Ambassador McCarthy mentioned. So we can do two things. We can criticize this relationship and also scrutinize our government. We have a president who doesn't know what he's doing. They don't know what they're doing. These guys don't know what they're doing. So you have, as Ambassador McCarthy mentioned, he toured the country and he saw the hospitals and deplorable conditions. We've said this all the time. We've talked about this time and time and again, but who is listening? If you went there now, Thomas, and did the same assessment that Ambassador McCarthy did and put up an op-ed, who's going to listen to you? You're not going to have anyone listen to you. But once the ambassador spoke about that, you saw everyone getting up, trying to defend themselves against those accusations. So the ambassador is correct. So the question for us is, the medium is not like what he's saying is wrong, but what we're saying, we're sitting here saying is that, is he the right messenger? So that's the question. That's where a lot of us are coming from. But the government of Liberia is allowing that to happen. This is a very corrupt administration. This is a very incompetent administration. They have no business in leadership, but the Liberian people voted for them anyway. And this is where we are.
Thank you, Mohammed. Let me take this time to welcome Mr. Kelebu Gonglo, who is also a regular panelist here. So, Mr. Gonglo, welcome.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be here. Welcome by Ahmed and Mohammed.
Thank you. So welcoming you is to give you the next question that I have. So everyone has spoken about the historical relationship that we've built with the U.S. and what role we've played in the past. So my question to you is, at this point in time, are we doing our best to be able to build on this relationship, or we have taken it for granted?
Well, I will put it this way. I don't know what is discussing whether we're taking it for granted might be the right way to frame it. But here what I would say for the statement that Ambassador McCarthy issued. A few days ago, we were on the same platform discussing. I believe you are on the platform. The ambassador didn't say anything that is extraordinary, that is new. A few months ago, on this very platform, Ahmed, Mohammed, Dr. Du, we all agree that corruption was an existential threat to Liberia. So if you read this statement from the ambassador, the way you can sum everything is he just saying corruption is at the zenith in Liberia, because I think the second paragraph, I can read that here quickly, a few lines. He said, lest you think this is the work of one political party, that notion was quickly dispelled by Liberians I talked to. The blacking of resources is so complete that it must be institutional. And the lack of any alarm being raised indicates a syndicate involving players at the legislature, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So when he went through this, he said he can't even attribute to one political party. And we all can relate to that in recent history. Under the UP government, massive corruption, where they would just passing the bill, passing the law, approve concession without any scrutiny. Until an international audit firm came and said out of the 68 concessions, only 66 only 2 met legal requirement under the laws of Liberia. But our legislature and the executive signed 66 bogus agreement into law that they meet a minimum requirement of our own laws. What does that tell you? So what the ambassador has said here is nothing new. I think the only thing that is new is that McCarthy was not ambassador at the time. He's just been ambassador for the past 2 years. So he's saying something from what he has observed, and it looks like it's new to him. But those of us who are Liberian observers, it's nothing new. We are quite aware of even much more bigger scheme than this. So I think what we need to do is to just stick to what we already know. That corruption is either going to put an end to Liberia as we don't put an end to corruption. And we all agree that 2023 should be about corruption and nothing else. Because you can have your development plan, with corruption, you're not going to attract investment. With corruption permeates in various forms. It makes the legal system corrupt. It makes the justice system corrupt. Everything goes down the drain. And this is the path Liberia is on now. For me, that's why I would say it's not more or less to put it in perspective. Every nation, when you show respect for yourself as a nation, you don't have to be a big country in Nigeria. You don't have to have a population in Nigeria. Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, I remember I read in the magazine when he died in the 90s. They searched all the European banks. He did not have any account in Europe. He did not have any account in Western Bank. They had respect for him because he could stand up and say to Western powers what Tanzania interest was, because they could not find anything on him. I've heard similar things with Paul Kagame, that he has no holding anywhere. That's why he stands his ground in many instances. John McAfoley of Tanzania, the late, follows similar culture. We need to have a Liberian leader that Liberians can be proud of and begin to quote, just as we are referencing past presidents from other countries. Like we talk about Nkrumah, we talk about Osaivo, Dr. Nkrumah, we talk about Dr. Ahmed Seguture. I mean, we need to have a Liberian that we can be proud of and say, this is a Liberian leader that we can reference. As a stand, we don't have.
Thank you.
So we're excited about something that we already know.
Thank you, Mr. Gongolo. And we're going to get to the statement and be able to pick out the issues that are in there. But we just wanted to really situate this whole issue of the ambassadors, because this statement is not his first statement. Since he arrived, he has been more engaging with the media, putting letters, op-eds, and statements. And so we just wanted to contextualize that within the foreign policy relationship between the U.S. and Liberia. So I want to come to you next, Ahmed. So in 2021, the US government developed a US strategy on countering corruption, which was the first ever the US government has actually developed and actually elevated anti-corruption to the issue of a national security issue for the US government. So there's already that global initiative that is taking place from the perspective of the US government. And then you had these things happening in Liberia from 2018, 2019, the missing currency, that was investigated with the support of USAID, and all of these, the issue of the 25 million, the mop up exercise, and all of that. So, to what extent do you think this focus on corruption is it more from the perspective of the global initiative from the US government, or this is driven more by the conditions on the ground when it comes to corruption in Liberia?
Thank you. Fair question. Look, Thomas, let's step back and first of all, quickly examine what does an ambassador, what is the role of an ambassador, of the U.S. ambassador? An ambassador's role, the ambassador is the only federal government official who is above the agency's head, right? The ambassador reports directly to the president. Of course, they respect the Secretary of State, right? I mean, because they work under the State Department, right? But the U.S. ambassador represents the president of the United States to the host country. The U.S. ambassador is the face of the U.S. government, obviously, in that host country, and they also present the country's interest, the foreign policy and the domestic interest position of that country. So they present and the policies of the country in the host country, right? So that tells you that this corruption issue is a national security issue as far as the American foreign policy is concerned. Why? Because they've seen failed states where terrorists have risen from, and they've caused havoc and presented threats to U.S. national security. They've seen, I mean, we can name a number of countries where the United States focuses as a matter of foreign policy, solely based on national security interest, that aspect of that foreign policy. And so they've identified corruption as an existential threat, as Mr. Gongo likes to say, as an existential threat to the national security of the United States, because failed states like Afghanistan, and what we're seeing in places like Lebanon, what we're seeing happening in Palestine, what we're seeing happening in other countries in the Middle East, that, you can argue the U.S. government itself may have contributed in terms of foreign politics to foreign policy to some of those problems in Latin America and so on, with the immigration issues, migrants coming up to the border. Those are things that you can, they do assessment around and say, okay, so what do we do? What are the main problems that are presenting threats to our national security interests, to our domestic economic interests? And corruption has been elevated at the highest. Well, lo and behold, in Liberia, our government has always lived in corruption. Our officials clamor for public office, not for the sake of public service, but for the sake of enriching themselves. It's as if we do not have any means or that we don't even know how how to create wealth for ourselves and how else to earn a decent living other than going in government and looting, right? So you're right, Thomas, that this is, to me, is not just a function of what's happening locally, is a function of what's happening with U.S. foreign policy, with U.S. domestic policy, but also what's happening globally. And then you send an ambassador to a country where this is the practice. This is essentially the reason this threat. This is why the country exists. It's Someone said to me once, look, it looks like this is a welfare state where people go to the state and just rely on rent. And they're not able to grow anything. They're not able to make anything. They're not able to manufacture anything. And they just live on rent that they collect from a consumption economy. Right. So McCarthy, before Ambassador McCarthy came to Liberia, if you watch his confirmation hearing, he said that I will make corruption my number one priority when I hit the ground. I will make corruption my number one priority. Why? Because corruption has been identified as the number one menace in Liberia. Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, who was served as ambassador to Liberia, who is now the U.S. ambassador at the United Nations, at every and any opportunity that she's spoken to an African audience, she has mentioned that Liberia's number one problem is corruption. That if Liberia can get corruption under control, a lot of these institutional failures, a lot of these governance system failures will be minimized and will be addressed. And I agree. Why? Because if you look at hospitals like Tabata, Bombing Hill, where I was born, that all they needed, all that was allocated in the budget is $100,000. And yet the government cannot supply that. Whereas you have individuals who are not even up to ministerial level are walking away with millions of dollars and reaching themselves all over the place. Come on now, let's think about this. Where life and death, it's the matter of life and death, where pregnant women are supposed to go to deliver their babies safely, but you don't have generator, you don't have any kind of medication or even doctors or nurses in the hospital. Is essentially not running. You put a structure up in Bopulu City, my own hometown, and yet you don't have anything there. That's not a hospital. A hospital is when it's equipped. When you have electricity, you have medicine, you have equipment, you have doctors. These are the issues. And everybody here is right. Mr. Gonglo said, these are not new issues. But why is it different? It's because it's the U.S. ambassador, because Ambassador McCarthy has a platform. He's speaking for his government. And when the U.S. government speaks to us, we listen. So, yes, it's both the function of what's happening in Liberia, who we have become, we've turned ourselves into, but also a function of the United States national security policy, national domestic policy, and of course, that then translates to their foreign policy interest.
Thank you, Ahmed. I'll come to you next, Doug. Ahmed spoke about the issue of the ambassador's confirmation hearing and the issue of the national security or the U.S. strategy on countering corruption that I spoke about. I had listened to a foreign policy analyst in Liberia, and what he said was that the Liberian government did not take into account those signals that the U.S. government was putting out there. And this was a new administration coming in, prioritizing countering corruption. And then you have a traditional partner. Why do you think the Liberian government failed to even get these signals? And like Ahmed said, even on the celebration of our 200 years, the representative of the U.S. government, when instead of going back to the history of this relationship that we have and how we could celebrate it, turned everything around and said, this country, you guys are so corrupt. So the signal has always been there from the ambassador, from his confirmation hearing, from our previous ambassador, who Liberians love a lot. I think Louva County calls her Quebec. And she goes to the UN and start to just train on us. So why do you think the government did not really pay attention to all of these signals that were coming out?
How can you pay attention to something you don't know? You can't, you can't prepare. From the beginning, I remember it was 12 who said sometime, right when they came to power, we're going to diversify our, approach to development, to partnership. And then they flew to somewhere in South Asia, when they started somebody back room, and 5 ministers flying from Liberia to go to South Asia to go sign a $500 million contract with a company that does not exist. From that point, you could tell that these people were not to be taken seriously. These were the small signs, and they couldn't read it. They couldn't say, okay, all we have to do to stay the course, maintain the country on the trajectory that was set by Madame Sirleaf. You couldn't have had better relationship with the World Bank or the IMF. But before they got to the IMF and the World Bank, they had to go through all kind of shenanigans, to all kind of fake issues and all of that, corrupt practices. The same thing that they used to do, like getting people to pre-finance projects that are never completed or that they have no use actually, because the pre-financement pays you. Does not, it doesn't matter. The government owes the money. So that's the problem. So doing that, you do that, and then you think that you number one partner, people who help you through the peace process, people who, there are more Liberians. I'm sure there are more Liberians in this country today in the U.S. than anywhere else besides Liberia. And you don't pay attention to their politics. You don't say, okay, we depend on these people for a lot of things, investment. Can you imagine if every U.S. Official who traveled to Africa in the last 2-3 years had first stopped in Liberia for 2 days? Investors will say, you know what? Let's check this place. It doesn't happen like that. If you're out, you're out. They did not pay attention to it, and they thought they were going to reinvent the wheel, but all they had to do was to stay the course. World Bank and IMF don't develop countries. They're like private banks. They loan you money, and they force you to do things, and then they get paid, and then no matter how long, because they say, we're there to stay. So you can say, okay, we'll pay you in 200 years. They'll say, okay, because they will control you. But that's not the problem. The problem is they open avenues to the world of capitals. If you don't know that, and then you start doing all kind of shenanigans and going to somebody with Burkina Faso will come and build, how much? What? $500 million highway for you in the middle of the jungle, that kind of deals. And then you go, So people watch you. They say, okay, what is coming after Madame Sirleaf? Say, what? Oh, okay, footballer. Maybe he got people surrounding him. And then you surround yourself with people who put the country in danger, who, is the NPFL and the AFL that kill Liberians. Everything falls from there. That conflict between the NPFL and the AFL, that's the problem, the origin of our problem. And that's why killed 300,000 people. And then you put those two people together to form a government. One could say, okay, if you do that, then you have achieved the ultimate path to reconciliation. You brought together the two people who caused the whole harm. But then, instead of that, you turn it to use it into a machine. You turn it into a machine. And people watch you, especially people who pay you money, they pay you bills. They open doors for you. You could say you're a sovereign country, but if the U.S. dumps Liberia, nobody sees Liberia except crooks. Either you like it or not, that's the colonial history of Africa. We're still living it. We don't want it. We are against it. It demeans us. But if Biden were to say, oh, Liberians are always, part in Africa, I'm going to start with Liberia and spend 2 days in Monrovia and bring, 200 businessmen with me, businessmen and businesswomen with me to Monrovia. Liberia, we've changed. But is that going to happen? No.
Thank you, Derek. So, Mohammed, as we move on gradually, we've seen that this relationship has deteriorated over the past couple of years. To what extent do you think it's important to be able to put a team together that understand all of these historical issues like Doug was talking about, not only our history with our partner, but to understand the international system, the international financial system? I mean, it's not a bad thing to say we are going to diversify our sources of development finance, right? But you have to do it with legitimate institutions, because these things also come back to bite you when you deal with institutions that don't have credibility. I mean, we're already a country that don't have any good credit. We don't even have a credit rating system, so it gives us problem. But my question is, to what extent, regardless of who is the president, that you put a team together that can be able to manage your foreign policy very well, to have a
Yeah.
very good policy in place and to be able to implement that?
It's an excellent question. I think it's a profound question. So you put it into little segments. I think I better work with that. So if you look at, you touch on the historical part of it. The leadership right now, they don't know Liberia's diplomatic history, right? These guys don't know. They don't care. They're not intellectually curious. So to start off, so you start off by looking at the history. You have people saying now, "Oh, we don't want to go to the past. We don't want to hear about what happened in the 1900s, or we don't want to hear about J.J. Roberts' time." So people speak in this manner in Liberia in governmental circles, the labor industry. So people speak in this manner in a very contemptuous manner of history. But I'll counter. If you don't know your past, you will not. How can you better prepare yourself for your future if you don't know your past? We had a whole show one time, and we talk about the history of Liberia's diplomatic relations with the United States. So I'm not going to belabor that point tonight. So one of the things I want to say is that when the United States had its first ambassador to Liberia, this individual who went to Liberia, this ambassador, was a civil rights advocate. To me, that shows some seriousness. And through him, there was an elevation of minorities, Black people in these positions. What did we do reciprocally? How do we reciprocate that? We Liberia appointed Charles D.B. King as its ambassador, former President Charles D.B. King as its ambassador to the United States of America. Now, if you look at the history of Charles D.B. King and what Charles D.B. King did to the Liberian, the people in different parts, southeast and whatnot, he was engaged in modern day slavery. So this is cynical at best. Mr. Tubman appointment of Charles D.B. King. To me, this does not really show its seriousness. So if you're going to send an ambassador of your country to the United States of America, and you say this is your most important ally, are you going to be sending a former president who's very tainted, who was involved in slavery? So there was a lack of understanding of history on Mr. Tubman's part. And those things have continued to this day. The guys are our presidents, our leaders. They don't understand history. They don't understand the dynamics of foreign affairs. One of the things that Dr. Douglas mentioned, how many countries, if you look around Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, or more broadly, the African continent, how many countries, how many governments in any country will tell you, oh yes, because of the IMF, we're doing well today. We're doing well right now because of the funding I got from the IMF. These are band-aid. Whenever you have governments take these loans from the IMF, especially the Liberian government. And it's not just the IMF, there are other multilateral institutions as well. Whenever the Liberian government is doing this, they're taking this money and putting this money in their pocket. You don't see the development anymore. So you have a government whose domestic policy to borrow from the great Alaric Toba, whose domestic policy is based on theft. and their foreign policy is based on begging. So they go to China and they borrow. They borrow from the Chinese. They beg the Chinese for money. They go to Japan, they borrow money. They go to India, they borrow money. They go to Israel, they borrow money. They come to the United States, they borrow. You know, it's a shame. They go to France, they borrow. It's a shame that, you know, our government is a government that borrows money. We don't need to borrow. If I'm president, you're not borrowing a dime from anybody. We're not borrowing any money. That would be the end of borrowing, right? We're not taking any more loans. That's the end of loans, because the money to run that country is right there. It's right, sitting right under their feet, or perhaps I might say right in their pockets. Take the money out of people's pockets and put it to work. Build roads, schools, and hospitals, and staff these hospitals. Build these roads. I'm not talking about, you take the machine and just clean up, a little pavement and say, you call it a road. Thomas, when I was a, elementary school student in Kilipo, and we will come up to Zweju to see my mom, my dad and all. I was living with my uncle as a child. We used to have, navigate on some bad roads. And then when I grew up, I came back to my dad and I was, going to school in Zweju. And, once in a while I would go to, Monrovia to give vacation with another uncle there. In the rainy season, you see vehicles parked that can't move because of bad roads. And this is years ago. This is not yesterday, let me tell you. But today, in 2023, this still happens. Why is that? Why is that? And this is a serious, fundamental question that every leader who is serious, and I'm not just talking about George Weah, I'm also talking about the leaders in the legislature, because they don't think they're leaders. They don't think of themselves when we talk about leadership failure, and they look at George Weah, with a side eye. No, they are also, to be held accountable here. Thomas, there's no road now going to the Southeast. Okay. You get out there and they say, well, we can't go because it's the rainy season. We are one of the few countries now in West Africa who will wait, for the rains to stop before we start mass traveling, or when we travel, right? And before you get to, you get up from Ganta to Zweju, and before you get to Zweju, you're all muddy up. What the hell is that? It's unacceptable to me. And so if the United States ambassador is talking about these things, these are the very things that we've talked about over and over and over. And again, this is a very old country. This country is over 170 years old. And here we are sitting here in 2023 talking about the issues that have existed forever and ever and ever. So what is going on, to conclude, is the failure of leadership at all levels, at the executive level, at the legislative level, at the local level. You try to give $200,000 to a superintendent just now and say, I need you to build that road and give me a breakdown. You're not going to get a breakdown. What you're going to probably get is that the superintendent sends someone in your office, with a handsome bribe, wrapped up in something, and send somebody to you and say, my man, forget about that team, man. What are you doing? You come from America. My man, you come here to, that thing you come here for? You can't come build your house. Your friend ain't building their house. Liberians talk this way. It is very unpatriotic. You have leaders who are very unpatriotic. You have leaders who have no business, being leaders. And so that's what the problem is.
Thank you, Mohammed. So, Mr. Gonglo, we come to you next. You went to the statement earlier. I think through the course of the discussion, we've managed to, we've discussed the issue of this historical tie the relationship where it is right now. I think in many instances, when you listen to Liberians, they will always say the ambassador says this, the ambassador says that. But I think we've been able to contextualize this to say that this is actually the position, like Ahmed said, the position of the US government, because it's not only the ambassador saying it, it's also other US government officials saying it. And like Dr. Duke said, even with the high profile visits that we've had on the continent as a traditional partner, we've now been included. Countries like Zambia now, many of these visits, people go to Zambia because of the different reforms that they are doing. Tanzania has been picked in all of that. You earlier went into the ambassador's speech and lifted some of the issues that he highlighted. These are not new, but in many instances, these are valid concerns. And like other people have said, others have been saying it, but because he says it now, we are talking about it. So in addition to the point you highlighted, I want us to go to the speech now from the beginning to the end. What are those issues that stand up to you from the statement that he highlighted? Because there are issues with decentralization in there, issues with revenue generation, issues with corruption related to the health sector, to the education sector. So I just want to get back to you. Let's now go through through this press statement, and then we will come to the reactions that we've gotten from the government of Liberia and some political actors.
Well, yeah. So first, let me just add this. I listened to Mohammed. And before that, Dude even spoke on similar issues. You see the pattern in Africa in 1997. I don't know how many of you remember the Asian Tigers, the Asian Tiger economic crisis. I did a little bit of research on that when I was working in East Timor with a UN mission. Saying Indonesia was part of the Asian Tigers. I managed to read a few literature on that. The reason why the World Bank, the IMF, the global financial institutions were nervous, and they have to do everything to save, the Asian Tigers economy from collapsing, was because the loan they took from the World Bank, and what the guys did, they invested in small scale industry. These monies are not sitting down in Western banks, in the Suez Bank, that they can lay their hand on and seize it, from them. So for African leaders, like Mohammed said, our foreign policy is one of begging, our economic policy is one of borrowing. We have our resources, we don't develop it, we don't invest to improve our means of production and our value, do value addition so that we access the global market. We don't do that. Why our leaders don't do that? Because it's easier for them to take the physical cash and then just personalize it and use it and pass it along on to the future generation. That's what they do. So this is why government after government, they boast of signing loan agreement with World Bank, because bulk of that cash, they manage somehow and they remain with them. They may throw small out there and say, hey, we're giving small loan to farmers. We're doing road. But they take most of it because the money is essentially for the country. The World Bank is just managing the procurement process and whatever. It's essentially for the country. You're going to pay by. So the government has a greater say in how they're going to use it. They just manage some process. So I just want to throw that out. The reason why we are less important is because of our economic policy, the way we manage to borrow, and our foreign policy. Liberia could be a powerful nation that even the United States, regardless of our population, could respect and listen to if our leaders were transparent, were patriotic. And like today, if Liberia was industrialized and we have 4-5 airstrips, universities, medical schools, we are producing lawyers, doctors, engineers, and sending them abroad to work, people will be trooping to Liberia and say, what country is this? We're getting the best engineers, the best physicists, the best mathematicians that come from that country. But we missed them out. We missed it because collectively Liberians always have small thinking, generally. We just think the way the country is small, we should think small about development, about our future, which is very unfortunate. Until we have a big thinking leader, we're going to say the same thing next year. We're going to say the same thing 10 years from now. And that's how our story has been since 1847. But to the main issue with the ambassador's statement, I read the piece that for me stands out the most is the fact that the ambassador recognized that this is not a one political party issue. It is historical. Yes, he didn't mention historical, but it is historical because he's not being Liberia all that time. He said, this is not a one political party issue. He said the Liberians are met on the trip, they dispel that notion because they've seen it from government to government. So it's not one political party issue. So now, how do we address that? The way we address it is to strengthen institutions. But it's difficult for us to even argue that institutions matter. We can say that, which is true, institutions matter. But how are we strengthening institutions? The ANC is gone. One president woke up one morning, just by a stroke of pen, they passed new bill and said, it's gone. One legislature woke up one morning and said, look, I don't like that justice in the Supreme Court, Justice Cabinet Janet. You got to go. It's gone. So institution matter. The very Supreme Court presided over an unjust process. So it's difficult for me intellectually to argue the truth that institution matters. When it comes to Liberia, it's difficult to say whether institutions really do matter. I think personality and egos and individuals matter in Liberia much more than institution, than probably the principle, So someone said a few months ago, specifically I think Darius Zilong, he was on OKFA, not listen to him. Not because Councillor Gongo is my brother, but he said something that was very profound to me. He said, we are in the country. He said, what kind of country is this? Liberian character is strange. That a Tiawan Gonglo who announced that he's running, I wouldn't see the ground shaking. He said, it tells us something. He said, this guy's life is a Bible. He lived a transparent life so far. We are not even moved by that. We are moved by Thomas Falah. Thomas Falah. He said it. And I'd listen to him and say, wow, this is a performance statement. About Port. I'm not sure we've seen any property about Paul, but we talk about him. How much have we even tried to honor him, even by having about Paul Institute, or even name one department at the University of Liberia in honor of Abba Port, or to even have a fellowship program to name professors that we can give them research grant to say this is Abba Port, a fellow. Professor Adulai Dugle is Abapo fellow. He's teaching and reading and writing on the doctrine and activism of Abapo. We don't invest in good things. We invest in the wrong thing and we promote the wrong thing. This is a country that is called Liberia. So, come to the ambassador, I argue that decentralization is a good thing. Devolution of power to the people is good. But we have to tread it carefully. America is one of the most decentralized countries. I live in a small borough here. We have our borough council, and next door, we don't even have a post office. We use Derby post office because Derby and Carwin, they're small area, but they are local government. They got a mayor, we got a borough council, we got a school, this, that. Everything is decentralized. But the question is, there was a system developed already, and they started to break it down. In a country like Liberia, that institutions don't matter. Personalities, egos are the trump. They trump the day. When we move to decentralize, we are also decentralizing the bad. We are decentralizing also the evil. The evil at the national level, we're just spreading it. the inability to improve services at the national level, we say, okay, we just want in fact, district procurement committee, we want district this. We are just decentralizing corruption. So then it will even be difficult to fight the corruption because you spread corruption in 73 districts. That's difficult to fight now.
Thank you.
We have to think on that.
Thank you. So, Dr. Du, building on this point of decentralization, I think one of the critical points that the ambassador makes in there is the issue of neglect for those people outside the capital. And we all do, I mean, we have this slogan, Monrovia is not Liberia, Monrovia is not Liberia, but essentially this is the case. We have the central government that controls all of the resources, including the resources that come from the subnational, which is the Leeward counties. And when they come to Monrovia, they don't even go back. I mean, after the Civil War, the issue of marginalization was one of those factors that was identified as the source of the Civil War, and therefore Liberia needed to decentralize. And what essentially happened was that decentralization actually took over the entire developing world in the 1990s. You had all of these countries, Indonesia and other countries, they decentralized because they wanted to improve service delivery and promote the participation of citizens in governance. But in that 1990 timeline is the time we went to Civil War. So we actually started decentralization late. So we've always had this centralized kind of government. So this neglect of the people in the Leeward counties, where we have the resources in Monrovia, we do whatever we want to do with it, and this one-way street of revenue coming and not going back. I just wanted you to comment on it. I mean, you have a long history of our governance system, and to be able to figure out exactly what do we do at this time. Because to say that when we decentralize, we're decentralizing corruption is to acknowledge that we're coming from a system where the center is corrupt. So if the center wants to stop corruption and stop it, then we are not decentralizing a system that is corrupt. But how do we then solve this problem? Because we need to provide services to those people out there.
I think the easiest way to transform the system is to turn the system upside down completely. We have, you have to, we're talking about history. We always say we have to go back into the past. Liberia was created by a small group of people who came in with their ideals, and they created a state to meet their needs. And then the culture, guided that, system. And for 100 and some years, there was no dispute about it. They integrated a few people, but it was their thing. So they're running from the top. It's like, okay, we're on top of you. We'll grab whatever we can, and slowly we'll integrate few people to adjust to our system so that we don't get thrown out. Then boom, 1980 happens. Those who were left outside of the system totally are now giving the same agent of domination that had prevailed for 100 some years. So you're actually taking the same guy, the same system that was the domination, corruption, subjugation, and all of that of the people, the typical colonial state where the capital is run by the governor who dictates to subjects in different parts of the country. So everything goes down. If you look at the American system came from the ground up. It was the small town sheriff, the small town leader who created democracy, and then to get to Washington. In our case, it was Monrovia that created a state to meet the needs of a certain class of people. And then all of a sudden, you have a new class of people thrown into control of that state. And what do? They only know the power and the benefits of power, the trappings of power, because they were not part of the building of that state. So we're still talking about that colonial state. So unless we transform that colonial state to turn it down, upside down, that, Liberians at the bottom, what you call the village, have the right to make their decision. That the policeman is not somebody sent from Morovia to run the police station. When he doesn't speak the language, he doesn't know the people, he doesn't care. That, people get up and say, okay, we're paying taxes, but what's happening to the money? Who's taking it? So you have to reverse the whole system. You have to turn it upside down. And you have to get people involved in the process. Let people know that they control the government, that it is their government. We don't have that because we just took, people came and then they say, yeah, this was a system based on domination. They didn't change anything. Nobody changed anything to the system. They just took it and then running with it. So we're still living with a colonial state. So that's the problem we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. I think, like Dennis said the other day, we will have a special program on decentralization and see how we can really resolve this problem of our governance system. But I will want us to quickly move over to the responses that came to the ambassador's statement. And I'll give each speaker a minute. And I will highlight just summarize some of these responses. The government of Liberia responded, and I think provided some data on disbursement to the health sector, the education sector. But the overall reaction was that, yes, we acknowledge what the ambassador is saying, but we've been trying to resolve this problem. We've invested in infrastructure and all of that. On the issue of aid, they clarified that the 65 million the U.S. ambassador mentioned is not really everything that goes to the government. They're implemented through USAID project, which we all know. But there's this G2G initiative that goes to the government when they deliver on specific results. We also heard from Senator Dillon. I think he had a Facebook post, and his was mostly welcoming the ambassador's statement and saying that these are things that that he and others have been pushing in the House. We also heard from Mr. Cummins that says that this is not something new. The Liberian people have been suffering with these things. And then he mentioned what his government will do if he becomes president. And we heard from Representative Swauko Dennis, who happened to have challenged the ambassador's statement that it was broadly just talking about the legislature without actually pointing out some of those that are standing out. And she says that the amount that the ambassador says that the legislature takes is not only for them, it's also for their staff and everything. So in terms of these responses, Ahmed, I will come to you. I mean, you follow development largely in Liberia. Give me your reaction to the government of Liberia's response in just a minute, because we need to discuss the VP's pick.
I read the government's reaction. I think it was quite underwhelming, to be frank. The ambassador was very systematic. The ambassador spoke of evidence and said, look, I promise my Congress that I will not be just an ambassador of Monrovia or in Monrovia. I will visit every single capital, sub-regional capital and county in Liberia, and I did. And then he said, everywhere I went, this is what I saw. This is what I saw. This is what I saw. And here's the evidence. I spoke to this person was in authority. What struck me was the ambassador stated how it seems like it's coordinated as if it's an organized crime, right? The Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, just the neglect, just little amount of money that there's a lot in the budget for this institution that's not there. These county service centers and what's happening there. So the government comes back and says, oh, by the way, the money the ambassador calls the U.S. government's invested in Liberia don't take it at face value because it's not cash that comes to budget support that goes towards recurring costs or anything like that. Come on, we all know that. That's not how international assistance works, right? It's assistance. When they said the U.S. government is promised $35 billion now to Ukraine, it's not all cash money to the Ukrainian government. The equipment they're sending, is the personnel they're sending, is the support. Everything is monetary terms, because if the Liberian government were to be the one actually doing the things that USAID is doing, it will cost the Liberian government money. And so the U.S. government calculates everything in monetary terms. So to try to educate us about that, to me, that was too elementary, really. And then they started naming disbursement amounts. Yes, But the ambassador spoke to that very issue. You disburse money that does not trickle down to the institution. It doesn't get to the county. You collect revenue. You perform, LRA perform better, the ambassador said, than 2019. And it's just one-way street. So the people pay the taxes, and then you don't go back. The tax revenue does not show up in their communities, trying to develop them, trying to keep the hospitals going and things like that. So I think the government reaction was very underwhelming for me. I read through like, okay, so this is just like singing the same song every day. Oh, it's not true. It's inaccurate because we disburse to education. Here's how much we disburse to health. Here's how much we disburse to internal affairs. Yeah, but we're saying it ended up in those officials' pockets by and large, and in a very coordinated and organized way. So it didn't trickle down. To me, it wasn't a strategically well thought out a reporter, the reporter that would have really sent this, this wave through that, oh, yeah, this government has debunked what the ambassador said. The evidence is so strong and overwhelming. It was not.
And Ahmed, just before I leave you, the ambassador had put up a lot of statements. Why do you think the government responded to this one at this point in time?
Well, this one was very evidentiary. This one was, look, the ambassador didn't just write a what would J.J. Roberts say type letter, and then pontificate about corruption. The ambassador said, I've been there. I've traveled. I spoke to Thomas Kane. I spoke to Mohammed, who was heading the county service center in Banga. They just sit around all day. There's nothing to do. In fact, people bring stuff to them. It has created more burdens and bureaucracy. They get on back and take it to Monrovia to get it processed before they bring it back. And so this one really got people's attention because the ambassador specifically spoke about budget numbers, LRA performance, and what's not happening, and the legislature, right? So, of course, legislators will come and react, right? And then the ambassador then, at the end of the day, wrap it around the entire government. So the executive branch will react, because it just painted them so badly that it was difficult to fight. The evidence is all there. So look, I went to Tottenham, I went to Bopulu. The hospital you built there, by the way, there's no electricity. There's nobody to run the hospital. So I think that's what really got to them. Plus the context also, because this is now election year, it came across as well. If we let this message to get out of control, it's going to damage our image to the electorate.
Okay. Thank you. And Doug, in a minute, Representative Swakoko Dennis's response that the ambassador should have highlighted that these sort of people are doing well. But to me, if I read the ambassador's statement, he's talking about the legislature as an entity. It's not like these two presidents are doing well, but overall as an entity. So, what's your stand on her response?
Yeah, but it's not up to the ambassador. The ambassador doesn't have to go and say, okay, this institution is corrupt, doing this and that, but there are 2 or 3 people who are doing better. And that's not his role, because they're there. If they make enough noise, people will hear them. There are more opposition people in the legislature than CDC people. But everything the president wants, he gets it. So she can come up and say, okay, we spent $40 million on what? 4,000 people. Can you imagine what she's saying? You have 103 legislatures, but you got another 3,900 people working for them. What do they do? She put that in the answer. I said, okay, you see, this is what so stupid. You say, oh, yeah, the money is not just for the legislature. We are just 103. But then we employ 3,900 people to take care of us. What do they do? 3,900 people to take care of the 103 people. What do they do? And then they talk about, she talked about $70 million given to 70 hospitals or something. That's like less than $100,000 a hospital. You give $100,000 to JJ Dawson or to the hospital in Nimba. What do they do with it? They have to buy gas, fuel, maintain light 24 hours a day, pay people, provide medicine because they're supposed to do that. What do they do with that? And then they don't get it. And I think her response was like, "Oh yeah, we some of us have been talking about this, so you should mention us." And she said something that was kind of funny, ironic, that this is not the 19th century when the U.S. ambassador will speak and then everybody will fall in line. Madam Representative, is worse than 19th century. You're going way, way below that. So he can say whatever he wants because you, foreign minister, cannot call the ambassador and say, Mr. Ambassador, we want you to come and justify this statement as a sovereign nation can do. All you do is issue a statement in the papers. So therefore, you are below 19th century.
All right. I think I think that summarizes it well. Let's do justice to the next topic. Sorry, Mohammed and Mr. Gonglo. I will start with you on the VP pick, considering that Ahmed and Dr. Doug have responded to these responses that have come in. I will start with you, Mr. Gonglo. At this point in time, is this still a secret who will be announced tomorrow by the former vice president as his VP pick, or we are already aware of what the selection is going to be?
Thank you. It's not a secret because his partner, his main partner is Prince Johnson. And today is Thursday. I believe on Tuesday, Prince Johnson had a press conference. I don't know, yesterday or Tuesday. I'm not too sure. But, he had a press conference that he said, hey, thank God, I tried, I didn't win. Jackson Abdul tried, he didn't succeed. So we now have our old man in person of Joseph Boakai. He's now going to take our son Jeremiah Kuhn to be rescued too. I'm asking all of you to turn out and support him. So he has actually announced who is going to be the running mate. I think what is going to happen tomorrow is just more or less a jamboree because Prince Johnson, even last week, he actually spoke on a radio in Nimba. He has his own radio station now. He called there and he said, hey, that's a lying part I'm going to say here, which is not true. He called there and said that, Yomli, the opposition is going to be united. Yomli has agreed to be the campaign manager for Boakai and Kuhn ticket. She's going to be the president pro tem, and Councillor Gongo is going to be the minister of justice. Everybody is united now, and the old man has united everybody, and we're moving in one direction. And there was rebuttal in Nimba at the station. Yombli people reported, Councillor Gongo people reported that is not true, he's lying. At no time, in fact, in the case of Councillor Gongo, supporters' reaction to say at no time has he met with Joseph Boakai since 2019 when he met at Charles Boayi funeral. They've never met. They've never discussed anything political. So that claim is far-fetched and is untrue. So Prince Johnson, his nature is he wants to be seen as a driver and not the passenger. So that's going to be a difficult relationship to cultivate. So he's always going to be ahead to make his followers believe that he's actually doing this. That's why he went ahead and announced Kuhn, so that Boakai is following his dictates. That's who we know him to be. But here's what I will say. I don't have much to say because picking vice presidential, picking a vice presidential candidate is personal. It's the choice of whoever is running, right? But there's one thing Boakai said in the interview on Front Page Africa. In that interview, I believe that was in January or late December, he said he's going to pick someone that reflects his values. He said, I will choose somebody who will reflect my value. That person will be patriotic. That person will be a person that will have a clean record because his supporters are projecting him to have a clean record. So, knowing what I know now, if Prince Johnson's statement is true that Boakai is going to pick Kuhn, I think that changes the debate. if Kun a clean person, is his record mirror Boakai record? This guy, at least to coherent Costa, has accused him of dealing him on parts. And people have said a lot of, so is Boakai saying that is a reflection of who he is? What is left for political debate? But at least in front page interview, Ambassador Boakai said, I will choose somebody who reflect my character, who reflect my values, who share the same vision with me. So what he's saying, his partner Prince Johnson party, UP and MDR now have a shared vision, and that's interesting, and that's very telling.
So Mohammed, what do you think influenced this speak? Because like Mr. Gongro said, from not only hearing from Prince Johnson, I think Senator Kanga put out a statement, and in that statement she said that on the 25th of April, the former vice president met with the Liberty Party and said that he has made his decision and that the selection is outside the Liberty Party. And we've always heard that she and Senator Kun were in the top two. So considering what Senator Johnson has been saying and the statement from Senator Kanga Lawrence, we can all conclude that it's going to be Senator Kun. But what do you think went into this selection? What do you think influenced this decision for Senator Kun to be the one preferred by the former vice president?
It's a simple political calculus. I mean, Prince Johnson, like him or not, he has demonstrated over several election cycles that he is the kingmaker from Nimba County. I mean, he is in many ways an arbitrage around the necks, collective necks of Nimbayans. But that being said, he can never be underestimated in Nimba County. To beat the man, you have to beat the man. Nimba County has never been able to politically, put the Prince Johnson, issue to bed. So it's not a mythology. Prince Johnson is the real deal in Nimba County, and I say that with a great deal of pain, but I have to be honest with the process. I mean, it's what it is. So the former vice president is looking for votes. So these votes, he took the realistic step here and said, I need votes. I mean, UR is not going to give me these votes. Henry Costa is not going to give me these votes. These guys are not going to give me these votes. Yambli Conga Lawrence, who doesn't even control the Liberty Party, control a small segment of disaffected individuals within the Liberty Party. It's not going to give me these votes. So I'm going to go somewhere that's going to give me these votes. So Prince Johnson offers that. And so, but let's step back and look at the big picture of the Liberian situation. So since the Civil War, I mentioned on this platform, one of the shows is that, what happened after the Civil War is that, you have the MPFL that, when you're writing the history books, years from now, of that Civil War, you can argue that the MPFL won the Civil War. It pains me very much to say that. But look at what's happening. All of these political parties, and including the ruling party, have elements of the MPFL. They've wrapped themselves around the outlets of the MPFL. The MPFL has babies, wings, offsprings, if you will, offshoots. At the NP, the party of the MPFL, which Joel Howard Taylor is partially a leader. Joel Howard Taylor came out of the MPFL and now to the NPP. She goes to the coalition with George Weah. what does Cummings do to outdo George Weah? He wraps himself around elements of the MPFL, Comrade Louis Brown and others, these powerful figures of the former MPFL. He wraps himself around them. And so he has to deal with that situation now. And now the former vice president, who we all thought had some clean hands in this whole thing, and he's going to do the right thing. So he wraps himself around this NPFL tree limb. So now you have all the major political parties who have elements of the NPFL. Jeremiah Conway is going to tell you, well, I didn't come out of the NPFL, but yet he's endorsed by Prince Johnson, who came out of the NPFL. So Prince Johnson, his political mentor, who a brilliant military strategist, and I will argue also, people think he's stupid. He's a political strategist as well. So keep in mind, he knows exactly what he's doing, and I think that Prince Johnson is able to pull votes, and people have always underestimated the popularity of Prince Johnson. He's able to pull votes this way for the vice president. So this is a very, very interesting dynamic to watch, in Nimba County. I mean, he has defeated all of the progressives in Nimba County, and those who, are supposed to give him headache, he's dispatched all of them. And, in several election cycles, from Ellen Johnson Sirleaf to George Weah, he has been able to say that I am a kingmaker.
Thank you, Mohammed. So, Doug, now that it's clear who's going to be announced on Friday, I mean, if you look at the statement from Senator Yombli Kanga, she essentially concludes that now that it's not the Liberty Party, they are going to have discussions in determining their next course of action. I mean, you have the URE team that has been very royal with they have been working in close collaboration with the Unity Party from the CPP days. So do you expect a fallout from this announcement that is going to be made tomorrow? And if there's going to be a fallout, where do you think these parties can go next? Where can Yombli go? Where can URE go? Or are they going to remain to unseat the incumbent president?
I saw an announcement when a press release or something by URE that ended with something that support for URE's presidency or something. So maybe he's going to run for president. Why not? He has the money, he has people, so he has a political party. He wants to spend some money. Let him go ahead and do it. I mean, poor country. When Yombli will go, but in her statement also, the last sentence where she talked about the patriotism and all of that, attachment to the country, and not subject to any political issues, and then especially to not a single person, meaning we don't have to be loyal to anybody, any one single person. Would that mean they're breaking away from Boakai? If Liberty Party is getting back together, it's going to get back together under Musa's chairmanship. And if that happens, they'll have to follow Musa Ability where he goes. And since he's with Cummings, could we see a ticket with Yombli and Cummings to balance the ticket Boakai Kum? But then again, we don't know if Boakai is going to select Kum. In 2017, I remember seeing somebody who was driving to Boakai's announcement, and the person was sure, 90% sure, that they were going to be the VP. I mean, 90%, they were sure, 90%. I mean, he was driving. Okay, wow. It was Finlay. Finlay thought he was 90% sure he was going to be Boakai VP. On his driving there, I met him somewhere. He said, yeah, I'm going there. I'm going to the announcement. I said, how hopeful you are? He said, very. I said, how? I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, he said 9%. And then I spoke to Duncan Cassell, the minister. she was also going there. She said, yes, Finland is going to be it. And then Boakai pulled Nukwe out of the hat. So don't be surprised. But, it's all interesting. But then again, all this hoopla about the pick of the VP point to one thing, that Boakai as a candidate has work to do. Because when you are a very strong presidential candidate, your vice president can be a cow or a mouse. Nobody cares. People will say that person will win that election with or without any vice president. So all this hoopla about the vice presidential nomination and all of that is good for the political season, but also bring question to how fragile is Boakai in terms of candidate. Okay, tomorrow is going to be the first time that he's going to present this man or that woman, and we'll see how he's ready to, take up the mantle and run the campaign, because tomorrow his campaign starts. But I don't see, it's hard when you spend 2 years with Boakai and then, pushing him and dragging him around and talking to him, talking for him. And then at the last minute, because he didn't pick somebody from your party, you say, okay, you cannot make this. You can't do that. Something people take, people have memories. People have memories. They remember things. You can't just go yesterday, oh yeah, this was the best person, and then next day say, oh no, yeah, for the last 2 years I was mistaken. No, you can't do it. As a grown man, we can't take you seriously.
Thank you, Dak. Ahmed, there has been a lot of conversation around the selection of the VP's running mate, and some people have said that other political leaders were waiting for that selection to be done before they can select their running mates. I had listened to one supporter of Mr. Cummings, and he said the reason why Mr. Cummings was announced after the vice president was they wanted the vice president to demonstrate that he was not going to go with Mr. Cummings. So that will mean that after tomorrow's announcement, we can see that other political leaders will move forward to select their running mates. So how do you think other political leaders can essentially benefit from any fallout that comes from this VP pick? I think Doug spoke about it briefly, but I would just want you to share your perspectives on how do you think other political leaders can benefit?
Well, it depends on what a political party is, or who the political leader is, or how much gravitas do they have, how much following do they have across the country, and how significant is that party, right? But of course, in any political competition such as this, it's all about calculus. It's about political calculus. People were trying to see who was hurt by this and now who will be hurt by this announcement, and how can they ingratiate toward this person or this group of people to sort of swing them their side, right? And politics, it's about two things. It's about perception, it's about numbers. You follow the data, you try to follow the hearts and minds of the people, and you do that by being perceptive, by working on perceptions, on people's emotions and things like that. So of course you cannot please everybody, no matter who Boakai picks. At the end of the day, you'll have people who will be angered by that choice. And so Boakai now will have to demonstrate his leadership skill to see how well he can assuage some people, how well can he convince some people that this is good for all of us. You just don't see it now. You need to calm down. Everybody needs to take a deep breath, because even if Boakai had picked, well, even if Boakai picks Cummings tomorrow, we don't know. It's up in the air. People are speculating. Some people are 100% sure who it's going to be. It could be anybody. It could be that Boakai and Cummings have been working behind the scenes so secretly, top secret, nobody knows, which is very highly unlikely. See Mr. Gonglo smiling, looking at me like, listen to that fool, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But I'm just saying, it could be anybody, right? It could be anybody. And so regardless who he picks, there will be fallout. So the work now is, how do you manage that fallout? So we will then begin to see this executive leadership skill now, this political skill, this persuasive skill, this negotiation skill, to see this leader in action, trying to make sure that Ure and Costa wing, all of the ALP folks, and they all remain on the Boakai's wings. It may not be Unity Party wings, but under Boakai's auspices. You'll see the Yambli Kanga Lawrence faction of the Liberty Party. There may be anger. I mean, I read that statement with a grain of salt because I didn't necessarily take away that, we're not loyal particular to individuals. It could mean, look, if Bakai's decision is for the best interest of the country, we're interested in learning more about that. It could be that. It could be that, we don't have to be loyal to Bakai. We'll try to figure out what else we could do. So they were being very strategic. They were very careful. At least my reading of the tea leaf was that they were being very careful with their word choices on the Conga Lawrence side. The Ure reaction, I'm hearing people, I haven't heard directly, read Ure statement, but I'm hearing people, Henry Costa is very angry. He might not even show up at that event. And those are signals, right? I mean, if you say, Ahmed, I will pick you, let's work together, and you've been giving me the impression all these years and months, then you say, come to Monrovia, I come to Monrovia, then you pick Dukley. Of course, I'll be flattered a little bit, like, man, why you did all this thing to me, right? But the strength of the leader then is, like Dr. Dukley was saying, people do remember. So is it your personal interest? Is it that they must pick Henry Costa, that, whose hands Ure holds up in the air before Ure is happy, or Costa is happy, or the Ure camp is happy? Must they pick Conga Lawrence before that wing of the Liberty Party is happy? If that's what they're saying, then we're also seeing in their own leadership thinking, in that mentality, and how they look at leadership and how they view state power and state authority, right? At the end of the day, though, all eyes will be on Boakai. I say, no matter who Boakai picks, if he picks Counts tomorrow, there will be people who were friends to Jeremiah Count before. I don't know, Mr. Gunga, am I pronouncing Count or Kun? People have different versions, right? There will be people who may have been his friends will now turn against him out of jealousy. There will be, of course, others who were hoping it would be them. It wasn't them. They'll be angry. There will be different groups. So I support Boakai. I supported Boakai, but I'm against this choice. Granted, what will happen next will be more critical than what happens tomorrow. What will happen the days and weeks following the announcement tomorrow, in my view, will be more critical than what happens tomorrow. And again, the attention will be on Boakai. How does he manage this troubled waters? Now, how is he going to let some people fall aside, or is he going to manage to keep all his flocks together so that he can have a big tent, a big house, and try to mend fences and try to heal wounds within the party? That will be a mark of a leader, and so that remains to be seen.
Thank you, Ahmed. And Mr. Gongra, I'm coming over to you. I want you to look in the future. I mean, regardless of who the vice president selects as running mate, what is the implication of that selection on future elections, say 2029?
Oh, it has a big implication. But before I come to the implications, let me just quickly make passing comment on Ahmed comment. I mean, let's face it. I follow very keenly some of the issues surrounding, the different things, the different formations in the opposition. I follow that. You see, choosing a running mate or a vice presidential candidate is a personal choice that whoever is a standard-bearer makes. In some institutions, maybe like the ANC, established progressive institution, is not really a choice for whoever. Those are things that the National Executive Committee will decide, because they have a line of succession already developed, that if you serve in this position, you can know this is your next step. So it comes along that. Not like we don't have well-developed political institutions in Liberia where succession issue is well defined. We don't have that based on the person longevity in the institutions and the understanding of the philosophy and ideology of the institution. We don't have that, unfortunately. But here is the thing. I've talked to the Henry Costa side. I've talked to not Henry Costa himself. I've talked to the Yomli Kanga side, not Yomli Kanga herself, but key members within the camp. I've talked to them. I think it's not one of the things to watch for really is tomorrow event. If Costa, Yuri, Lauren Kanga, Darius DeLong, those are towering figures in the opposition around Boakai. They help Boakai from the CPP, right? If those people are absent from that event, politically, there will be damaging. The headline on Monday will be Boakai allies run away from him. Or they will say Boakai showing his allies. I mean, that will be the headline. The headline will not be whatever Boakai or others consider positive tomorrow. Monday morning, like Ahmed said, the after event, if those people are absent tomorrow, that would be the news, not the fact that you need a running mate. And that will be just buried. Nobody will read about that, okay? That's one scenario. But here is what I will say. I think my hearing from the different camps, the angle that is coming, it's not so much that the Yomli faction, was not selected, but it is almost the near assurances that were given leading to the process. You remember Boakai went to Buchanan, was sitting down in the church with Yomli. They prepared a chair like president and vice president, sitting down. And they went to several churches in Buchanan, and the appeal was made, take our daughter. He met Yomli's father, Reverend Abba Kanga. So all these things happened, right? That he chronicled the event from Basel. He came to Monrovia. He invited her to Bombing, to his farm. And when they went on the farm, my information is, he said nothing. He said, listen, I just want to let you know I haven't made up my mind. Remain calm, and I will make the decision next week, and I will let you know. What was the essence of calling two persons that are in contention together? And when they say, I haven't decided, you can go by. You made them to drive from Monrovia there, and it's all in the news, it's on Facebook. You go to Buchanan, and I don't think he made that decision just in the last few days. You go to Buchanan, you go to 4 different churches, you're meeting family, you're having jamboree. I mean, politically, the appearance of it is that, oh, that's the way he's going to go, right? Then you come and you turn your back. I'm told that there was a meeting in Carisbrooke that lasted only 9 minutes. He wanted to meet Costa the same way he met Yomli. I think he met Yomli on yesterday and said, I've made up my mind, it's not going to be from your side. So he called Henry Costa. That's my information from, political Beltway in Monrovia. And Costa said, well, I want us to have the meeting in Carisbrooke. So he drove to Carisbrooke to meet. In that meeting was Yuri, was Costa, was Tala Yuri, executive of the ALP. And he said, I made up my mind, and I'm going to choose Kun.
Thank you.
Johnson Party. 1 minute. Let me just say on it. And there was no one question asked. I understand Yuri action. Are you ready now to dance with the devil? And he said, yes, I'm ready now to dance with the devil, even I don't like the devil. And that was the end of the meeting. It lasted less than 9 minutes. Okay? So I think there will definitely be implications. And how it will impact it, I don't know. It's left for political pundit to make that analysis.
Thank you, Mr. Gongolo. So we will move to our Tabata session, but just as you prepare your Tabata, I actually want us to look at beyond 2023. So 30 seconds to each of you. How do these elections, and let's add other political leaders, Boakai's election and all of that, how does it impact the upcoming elections beyond 2023? I mean, anybody that becomes a vice president, you've already been given a platform. We see that Ambassador Boakai was a vice president, and therefore he opted for the presidency and all of that. So let me start with you, Doug. In 30 seconds, how do you think the peak will impact upcoming elections?
You mean 2029?
No, yes.
I think that's too far to think about. Seriously, I mean, politics can change overnight. You don't know who's going to die. You don't know who's going to go to prison. You don't know who's going to run away. So you never know, and you don't know who's going to pop up. Sometimes leaders pop out. You remember Barack Obama when he came on the scene, they say, "Oh yeah, he wrote a nice book. He's going to sell a few books and then, go back to the Senate." And he went and won it. Patrick Talon in Benin, he was always number 5 in the polls up to 2 weeks before the elections. People say, "Oh, they may be selling cotton all over the place. Like cotton man will be running the place," and he beat everybody hands down. But so you can't predict 2029. Seriously, I will not engage myself into that kind of, I don't know, prediction, prophetizing what will happen. Anything can change between now and October. So
Okay. All right. I think we will let's
But Thomas, though, I respect that and what you said. However, selecting a running mate, it's so important because listen, it has to be somebody who can become president overnight. They're ready. They're, as they said, a heartbeat away from being president. That is real for the very reasons he just stated. I mean, anything is possible. Anything can change. So if you're picking someone just for the sake of it, to get vote, that is an error because if you didn't pick that person because they have what it takes to run the state, they have what it takes to be president, they have what it takes to sort of put it together. If they didn't pick them because they're well put together, that again they can be president with a phone call away, then that is problematic. And to me, that is the 2029 or beyond 2023 prediction. Any of these serious candidates picks, I think it has to be such a person, has to be somebody who holds sway, who's prepared, who's ready to be president any day, any minute.
Mohammed, 30 seconds.
Yeah, so I mean, this is nothing new. Look at all the other parties. Look at George Weah's CDC. I mean, look at who they have as the vice. Look who's the Liberian vice president, right? So you don't have any serious individuals as vice president, I don't think. So Boakai is not in a unique position here. Although I would love to see personally. I thought, because I know that there has been some alignment with some progressives. I thought he would have gone in that direction, just thinking out of the box. I mean, you have, Professor Tokba, Larry Tokba, you have, you have Dr. Yan and all these, progressives who, so the question I guess for him is, who can give me votes? And so that's not, when it comes to that, it's not unique to him. Everyone else is doing just that. And so, it'll be interesting to see if it will bear fruits.
All right. In the last 30 seconds, we'll go to Mr. Gonglo. There is this thought that when it comes to the selection of vice presidential candidates, sometimes people put the issue of winning ahead of governance, right? So some people pick their vice presidents that this person will help me to be able to govern. But if you put that priority ahead of it and you don't win, then you don't govern. And some people go with this thought that I want a vice presidential candidate, like we've all said, will bring me the numbers to win. But then when you win, then you don't have a team to be able to govern because the president and the vice president actually will have to drive the process. So in 30 seconds, do you think these considerations have changed with time? Do you think this is something that presidential candidates need to really consider as they pick? And then as you answer that question, I would just want everybody to prepare their tabatas We'll go to that and then we will conclude. I want to say sorry to our listeners who normally call on Fridays. We have a little bit of a technical problem. Dennis is not in studio today, so we will not be able to take your calls. But you can type in your Tabatas and we'll be able to highlight them when we get to the Tabata session. So just this issue of the issue of governance, the issue of winning, Mr. Gongro, in 30 seconds.
Well, so I would just limit my comment to Ambassador Boakai, since he's the Unity Party. That's a party that is actually on stage now compared to others. But here, what I will say though, I think if anything, for Ambassador Boakai, he has a history. He needs to learn from his history. And the question is, has he learned? In 2017, he went to the legislature and paid Nunkwe. And I mean, we were on the ground. There were two things that were considered. He said, Pele is the largest tribe and Nunkwe have money. Those were the two things he considered. And when he went for it, but Nunkwe was not the best. The voter was smart to know that, hey, corruption is the main thing we are concerned about. This guy is corrupt. Yes, he's Pele, but he's not a good Pele man. Okay? So they didn't vote him. Now you want to go to Nima, he said Nima gave population. But there are good people in Nima who are not corrupt. You go for Prince Johnson Party, it's Allah, Kun, records are all on the Facebook. No, there are demonstration, roll, Jeremiah Kun, roll, Thomas Fala, roll. They are there. Prince Johnson voice, his own voice is there. We played the last time. What he called Jeremiah Kun a role, a criminal. Now, you look for a vote. You consider that you don't look at governance. So the question is, what about Boakai learned in 2017? I don't know.
Thank you so much. So let's go with the Tabata. Like Dennis always said, is it's an expression in the Kru language that means nonsense. I don't know if you all came across any of that during the course of this week. So I will start with Mr. Sharif. What's your Tabata of the week?
Mine is just so recent. In recent times, I came across just I was following the news, and I came across this business investor who's opening the first mayonnaise factory in Liberia. I mean, how lazy are we now that we can't come up with our own mayonnaise factory? Mayonnaise is not hard to make. Thomas, you can make mayonnaise, from your home. I mean, so now we have to dispatch the first lady of Liberia, who will take resources out there, to go cut the ribbon to a mayonnaise factory. And this is what we're celebrating with a country that is 175 years old or more. Please, someone help me with the math. I'm not, calculating right now. But just the fact that we have to waste our time in the media institution, this is all over the place, permeating the airwaves and, the communication ecosystem. It's just absolute nonsense. And, as Dennis would say, it's a tabata.
Thank you, Mohammed. Dr. Duke?
My Tabata would be this aborted retreat in Bassa. In Buchanan, the whole government went, and then President changed his mind. He said, I don't feel good. Let's all go back home. Although the day before, nobody knew there was going to be a retreat.
Thank you, Mr. Gonglo. You're muted.
Yeah, my Tabata would be my Tabata is not public, but is credible. My Tabata would be that the fact that some people were rejected who have decided not to attend the occasion tomorrow. There is a fronted effort, and they're begging and giving them classification that you are the Iron Lady, you are the duo, you hold the key to this. So if the person is the Iron Lady, if the person is the real duo of 2023, why this person was not sitting on the left? So that would be my Tabata. It doesn't make sense. You left the person out.
Thank you, Ahmed, your Tabata. And then after this, we'll go to the comments from the listeners, which will include the Tabata of the week, and we highlight some of the comments that they've made so that we also recognize their participation. Ahmed, your Tabata.
Yeah, so yesterday or so, or maybe it was on Wednesday, on Tuesday, there was a broad daylight armed robbery, violent, uh, the killing of a man on Bushore Island near Mesorado compound. And so the newspapers, particularly Front Page Africa, reported that the account I read, they said they described so what happened and said a Fulani man who is yet to be identified. Right. So they, how armed robbers to walk up to this guy who had just withdrawn a huge sort of car from the bank and got on a keke, and these guys rushed up to the keke and hijacked it and said, hand us the money, come to this account. He didn't do it. He tried to argue with them. They shot him up, and he passed away right away. But then the Liberian mentality, like we're quick going to our discriminatory instinct. As a journalist, say a man was shot is yet to be identified, right? But you say a Fulani man, so you already know it's a Fulani, but then you say it's not identified. Just we're quick to run to the tribal thing. My question: how do you know this person was Fulani? I mean, like, how do you, how did you know this person was Fulani? Yet you're saying the police is yet to identify the person, right? Yeah, I guess I knew what they were trying to say. They don't know the name, but as far as they knew, that was a Fulani person. So if they shot somebody and the person, unfortunately, they shot someone. I was a bandit man who is yet to be identified, or I don't know, a crewman near Nuku Town who is yet to be identified. It just didn't make sense to me, but it spoke deep to me about how we think about one another and this diversity or the lack thereof
Yeah,
in Liberia.
that's a great point.
Yeah.
Sure. And exactly. I mean, also to see that broad daylight robberies leading to shooting and killing people is really sad in Liberia at the moment. But for me, I mean, my Tabata is something we discussed, the issue of the GOL response to the ambassador, especially on the issue of the 63 million. Whether these are channeled through USAID funded projects, I mean, the state still has a responsibility to make sure that every development funding goes to that country is effective. And there are a lot of global initiatives that have been done on this, and there are frameworks for you as a government to make sure that aid is effective and efficient in your country. So to just throw that away and say, okay, the 63 million, not everything comes to the government, the rest is implemented by the US government, is something that the state should not be saying. The state should ensure that those projects are designed that fall in line with our priorities and the resources are used effectively. So I don't think that was a way out of what the ambassador actually raised. And therefore, we need to improve on our aid effectiveness. So at this time, as you prepare your closing comments, I'll give you all 2 minutes each to conclude. We just watch the comments from our listeners for a second, and then we'll move on and conclude.
So
I see
read the people Tabata.
JG Tokba says Matabata is Nyombli Kanga Lauren constitute consultation after Ambassador James B returned. Oh, trying her down. Flomo Livingston, Matabata is Mr. Gonglo cannot talk about his brother VP pick, only JMB. What is his brother waiting for? Mr. Gonglo? you answer in your conclusion. Samuel, a regular listener and contributor to the program, my Tabata of the week is the UP selection process for vice president. Next. Peter Lewis. This Caleco guy is always briefing negativities against UP/Joe Boakai. He's not a good surrogate for his brother. He could damage his political ambition. Masakoli, several women died last year at Telewaya Hospital while giving birth due to lot of electricity and medical supplies. I think I think the person means due to the lack of electricity and medical supplies. And Telewaya was one of the health facilities mentioned by the ambassador. Shame on Weir.
Yeah.
JG Tukpa again, Liberia needs serious leadership that allows the system to function and allow the law to effectively act, prosecute individuals based on evidences, facts, and speedily adjudicate cases. Edison Pajibo, what the ambassador said is an eye-opener for every voter, especially as it regards the choice of president. If we want to live in the past, then it is Ambassador Boakai. If we want to remain in today's reality, then it is President Weir. And if we want to plan and live for the future, then it is Mr. Cummins.
Yeah, we don't want that. Such a political comment.
That should be a speech writer right there.
David Julie,
I like it. I like it.
David Julie, Matabata is almost
Well crafted.
well crafted. Matabata is for almost 200 years. Liberia has not got her act together. The only thing that Liberia does well is corruption. All right, we will stop there. We want to say thanks to all of our viewers and listeners. We want to thank you for your comments and contributions to tonight's discussion. Come back again on next Thursday, and you listen to some tough conversations around issues that are happening in Liberia. So at this time, I will come to your conclusions. Let's say 1 hour, not 1 hour, 1 minute, 30 seconds each. I'll start with you, Mr. Gongro, because you were the last. So this time you go first. Your conclusion.
All right, so let me quickly address myself to the guy who made a comment about me not being the best surrogate. But let me tell, I think his name is Peter. Peter, tonight we're discussing Joseph Boakai VP pick. The next time, if my brother is speaking, Councillor Gonglo is speaking, this show will also discuss his VP pick. When Comey is speaking, we're going to discuss ANC or Comey's VP pick. Okay? So it's not, tonight was meant just to discuss the Boakai VP pick and the Unity Party. So it has nothing to do with negativity. And for me, what I'm saying, these are facts, and that's my life. I always speak the truth. I speak on the records, and I've said nothing tonight that is shredding falsehood. Okay, so tonight has been a very good show. As always, I'm happy to share this platform with distinguished panelists who come here with wealth of knowledge and experience. So we are in election season, so we're going to be debating almost new things every week. There will be new movement, new thinking, new alliances. I believe 2023 might be one election that might be more realignment than ever in our history. I mean, we're going to see one beginning right after tomorrow event. I can predict for sure there will be definitely a realignment. The same folks that were in the cabinet, in the kitchen with Boakai, in the CPP, I can guarantee that in 2 weeks it will not be. You will have new cook in the kitchen. You will have new helpers in the kitchen. He's not going to have those same old folks. It's almost certain. What that would mean, I don't know. Because I'm not I don't know the future, but definitely there will be a new cook. Maybe the old cooks might be revealing how they used to cook in the kitchen. Whether they used to put more salt, whether they used to put more peppers, we'll start to hear those stories. And 2023 is going to be very interesting. And my only fear is the opposition has to be careful. The beneficiary of this is ultimately going to be the ruling party, because the ruling party will be standing and showing stability while the opposition tearing each other up. You can take it.
Thank you, Mr. Gongro. Mr. Sharif?
Yeah, so just again, thanks for this show. One of the things that one of the reactions from a member of the House of Representatives, Representative Swakoko Dennis, one of the things she failed to mention is that they're walking around with duty-free privileges. Why should they have duty-free privileges? They're not doing anything. Why should they be the highest paid legislatures? Perhaps, more than the members of the Liberian House of Representatives. Why should they? They're not doing anything. So that is a problem. And so if she was standing out there to ensure that they're not spending wastefully, um, then I will, listen to her. But I can't listen to anybody right now who's sitting in the House of Representatives, you know, who are, milking, who are fleecing the Liberian people of their hard-earned tax dollars. I mean, the ambassador said it, the Liberian Revenue Authority is doing very well. So where is the development that matches that? Where's our tax dollars? I mean, Gonglo mentioned he lives in a borough. I live in a borough as well. And, in our borough, I mean, people clean the streets. The government clean the streets. I mean, it's our tax dollars. So you see your tax dollars at work. And in Liberia, people don't see their tax dollars at work. And we should be outraged. In fact, we should be more outraged because we pay taxes that go to support them here. So our tax dollars here in the United States, part of that go to support their, economic banditry, stealing money, robbery, and all these different things. So I mean, it's really time that we all, speak up about all of the things that's going on. We've done it on this platform, time and time and again, but who's listening? The only time they seem to listen is when the United States ambassador says something.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'll move over to you, Ahmed. Mohammed mentioned something, the issue of taxes. When you do public finance, it says that taxes are a transfer from citizens and businesses to the government to deliver services. But in countries that are corrupt, that transfer is basically from the citizens, the private sector, to government officials.
Mm-hmm.
So
So the
over to you.
pockets, so
Yeah,
the pockets of government officials.
government officials. Yeah.
Thing, yeah. Look, in diplomacy, as I said, an ambassador's job is to be the direct representative of the head of state or the head of government in their foreign country. They represent and project their country's uh, policy, their country's, whether it's domestic policy or foreign policy objectives or national security policy. They're there to be the spokesperson for their government, the public face of their policy, and they're also there to seek their country's interests and the citizens of that country in that host country's interest. So we don't expect the U.S. government to be speaking in our interest, in the Liberian people's interest, but this particular ambassador is actually doing both. This ambassador is speaking for the Liberian people who can't speak for themselves. This ambassador is speaking for civil society that speaks and no one listens. This ambassador is speaking for opposition politicians or private citizens, journalists, media people who have been lifting these issues of neglect, these issues of taxation without representation, taxation without proper governance. And so if you want to be taken seriously as a sovereign country, as a sovereign government, you have to govern well. You have to treat your people well. You have to demonstrate that you are a country that matters in your country and internationally. If you're not doing any of that, people will speak to you anyhow. People will not remain diplomatic with you because diplomats air grievances behind the scenes, right? So that in nice language. But we're not saying that with McCarthy because McCarthy, the corruption is at the top of the agenda and Liberia is corrupt. He sees that Liberian officials are corrupt. He's going to represent his people's interests. And oddly enough, he's representing the interests of the people that the government, the Liberian government should be representing. So, this is an important topic. We're not just talking about it because it's new, but because somebody who has a platform who people listen to when they speak has spoken. That's why it got the government's attention. And so I think we should continue highlighting these issues as well. Hopefully somebody in government will listen and things will turn around for our people.
Thank you, Amen. Dr. Duke, you get the last word.
Yeah, thank you. My closing words would be about this whole discussion about what the ambassador said, and then the reaction from the government and Dennis, Representative Dennis, that is about numbers, as if the issue is not. See, that's what they don't get. They're not talking about the same thing. When the ambassador say you're not doing this, you don't just go and say, oh, yeah, but we did 10%, we did 20%. What's the substance? Is you lack of responsibility, you lack of organization, you lack of management. That's what the ambassador is talking about. But you say, oh, yeah, we did 10%, and some of us can speak up, Mr. It's like the governor speaking to his colony, or how you say it. The J.J. Roberts speaks, and then everybody put in line, and then people will say, Chief, we're not all bad, or we some of us trying. You got to look at us. It's shameful. It is shameful. As Ahmed said, the press, the civil society, opposition parties, they talk about these issues at variance, but nothing's been done. They don't care. And to have 103 people working in the legislature that employ another 3,900 people, what do they do? It's like 30% paid representative. For each one, 30%. They don't even, but they don't have water. They don't have toilet, flushing toilet in the whole place. I mean, these are the realities. I mean, you got 30% per representative. Can you imagine? So they brought everybody they knew to work for them. Wow. That's how bad it is. I remember when Sawyer moved to the mansion in 1993, he found out there was 960 people to clean the grounds.
Wow.
He said, but what do they do?
Wow.
They say, well, the president brought them, from the village. Some of them, the husband worked for him. So 960 people were assigned to clean the grounds. Wow. And they were all on the payroll. So it's the same system. There's lack of discipline, lack of management system, lack of anything, no organization. It's like the government, state is for money and power, period. It's not about service. It's not about public service. It's not about working for the people. A few people say it, but no, it's not. As far as Boakai nomination in VP tomorrow, I think we'll just sit and wait. His decision will be a reflection of his leadership in many ways. And the way he introduced that person will also be an indication of where his campaign will be going. So we just got to sit and watch. Some people will be happy, some people will not be happy, but hey, not everybody get to play.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc, and thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Mr. Gonglo. Thank you, Mohammed, for contributing like you always do on this platform. We want to thank our listeners that follow. In conclusion, I would just say, I take a piece from what Doc said. We need to relook at the state and be able to think whether the state that we had over the years still serves the purpose, and if we need to change it to be able to improve the welfare of Liberian citizens. On the issue of the peak, I think the country has waited for over 3 or 4 years. Tomorrow is it. So we'll get to know by the end of tomorrow. And Liberia is ahead of us. So maybe by the time we even wake up from here, or a few hours after waking up, we get to know who that peak is. And we'll wait and see what the ramifications are. But again, I want to say thanks, regardless of who the vice president selects, regardless of the way we try to transform our country. One of the messages that Focus on Liberia often sends out is that we are all Liberians. So regardless of whatever happens, we'll continue to all be Liberians, and we'll conclude this show as other shows with that song. So again, thank you all. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our